Okay.
I'm going to ask you to share with us the second inaugural address by Abraham Lincoln.
It's kind of interesting because in the program that they gave us at this inauguration, they made reference to Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. As a child, I grew up across the street from the Lincoln Memorial Congregational Church. And you must remember, my parents and their cohorts were the first generation after slavery. And they wanted to impress upon us, they did not want us to forget the horrors of slavery. So they had the same attitude about slavery that the Jews do about the Holocaust. So among the things that I had to learn, word for 706 words, was the second inaugural address delivered on March 4th, 1865, while the Civil War was still going on. And it begins with, at this second appearing to take the oath of the presidential office, there's less occasion for an extended address than there was at the first. Then a statement somewhat in detail of a course to be pursued was fitting and proper. Now, at the expiration of 4 years, during which public declarations have been countlessly brought forth on every point and phase of the great contest, which still absorbs the attention and engrosses the energies of the nation. Little that is new could be added. The progress of our arms, on which all else chiefly depends, is as well known to the public as to ourselves. There is little that I can add to that. On the occasion corresponding to this 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to an impending civil war. All dreaded it, all sought to avert it. While the inaugural address was being delivered from this place, insurgent agents were in the city seeking to destroy it without war, to dissolve the Union, to divide effects by negotiation. Both deprecated war, but one would make war rather than let the Union survive. The other would accept war rather than let it perish, and the war came. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest. All knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the object for which the insurgents would rend the Union even by war, while the government claimed no right to do more than to restrict the territorial enlargement of it. Both parties, neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration it has already attained. Neither anticipated that the cause of the conflict might cease with or even before the conflict itself should cease. Both looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and both invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any man should ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of another man's face. But let us judge not that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered, that of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must need be that offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. If we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses, which in the providence of God must need come, but having continued through his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and that he gives to both the North and the South this terrible wars, the woe due to those by whom the offense came. Shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in the living God always ascribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills it, it continues until all the wealth, piled by the bonds of his 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid with another drawn with the sword. As it was said 3,000 years ago, so it still must be said. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan, and to all that may achieve a just and lasting peace among ourselves and all nations. That was the second inaugural address.
That's wonderful. Let's have a big round of applause. David, when I sent the word out that you were going to be on the show, I said this would be your first time on the show, but it certainly won't be your last. But I want to ask you one thing briefly before I have one more guest I got to get in. So would you just tell us a little bit how Dr. King got you to move to the suburbs? I've heard this story. I heard it from your daughter-in-law, actually.
Yeah. Well, for the last 40 years, I lived in Winnetka. And on June of 1965, Dr. King spoke on the village green in Winnetka. And I was there. And I was amazed at how calm the quiet was. Before that, every time Martin Luther King appeared, of course, it precipitated a riot. But the 8,000 people who gathered on the green on the village green up in Winnetka, they seemed so incredibly receptive. And at that time, there was something called the Al Raby and his group. And,
I remember Al Raby, yeah. He was a wonderful man.
But anyhow, there was a North Shore housing project, and the idea was to open up the North Shore to African Americans. There weren't any African Americans living on the North Shore except in Evanston and a few in Glencoe. But the furthest thing from my mind was to move in Winnetka. And we were, I said, that's a great idea. I think somebody ought to do it. Not David James, but anyhow. We were coming back from that. As I said, I was absolutely impressed by how receptive the 8,000 people who were on the village green, received Dr. King. And there was a family there that the Eckhouses kept asking me, and finally Dr. King said, somebody's got to stick their neck out.
and he got you to do it.
Well, actually, I was a lawyer. I had been lived on the South Side and was doing pretty well. I had all the comforts of living in the mink-lined ghetto. So
the mink-lined ghetto. Remember that one.
But in any event, I had no reason. I'd paid for my house by that time, and I had no reason to make that kind of a venture. But I did, and in 1966, I moved to Winnetka. I was the first black family to move there. And one of the great payoffs was that I met my goddaughter, who's sitting over there, Ava Masick, and she went to school with one of my kids up in New Trier. But just to give you some insight on, my youngest was in kindergarten, and she left this classroom of 60 on the South Side, and when she got to Crow Island, she was in the class of 12 that had a teacher and 2 practice teachers there. So it kind of gives you an idea of the benefits, that I personally reaped from it, but I certainly didn't feel very comfortable about leaving those 60 kids behind with.
We're glad to have you in Rogers Park these days. And let's have a big round of applause for David F. James. And mark my words, he'll be back. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Live from the Heartland. I want to thank everybody who makes this program possible. Our producers, Laura Herman, Lisa Smith, on-site engineer and videographer, Evan West, our studio engineer, Susan Dunn, and my co-host, Katie Hogan and Lisa Smith. This is Michael James, host for this morning's edition, urging you to do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do. Over and out, and all power to the people. Yeah.
There we go.